I get the honor of going first, so I'm kind of the guinea pig, but I'm talking about learn. And then we're looking at the notion of learning with regards to ability and language acquisition. And so I am here as a representative of the Housing and Residence Life as an RA. There we go. So the two things that we talked about during the learn session was to understand and appreciate the diverse experience of others, as well as facilitating self-directed learning and help with the informal learning of others. So the one I really wanted to focus on was the first one, was understanding and appreciating the diverse experience of others, and I was taking that on my experience, not necessarily within housing and res life, but the way I've been able to mesh my life experiences with my role in housing and res life, and that's with the deaf and hard of hearing community integrated with the hearing community. So why this topic? This is something that I've always been kind of passionate about. It's something I grew up doing. This is baby Maia. Sign language was my first language, and so that's why this is an important topic, and I think it's really good for the brain and learning and developing. And so the stats are that 6 months you can remember a sign, at 8 months you're able to do full sentences. Or 2 years you can do full sentences, and so it's really important to be able to look at that and like how our own language develops alongside of that. And then I also have experience in Nicaragua where I go and teach at a deaf school, so being able to see that from another side of kids that don't have that language and like how it has applied and like affected them into their lives. So how does language help us be who we are meant to be? So what does this have to do with learn? Again, language is foundational. Without language, we're not able to communicate, process, learn, develop, any of those buzzwords. And then we're also able to be better student leaders because we process and are able to see how other people learn and how best to process those. And if anything, if you don't get anything else out of this TED Talk, ASL, American Sign Language, is a skill set. It really calls people in to learn and understand, and like especially with the community being somewhat on the margins of society, being able to call them into our normal society. So language deprivation, it atrophies the brain. It's really looking at the different ways that without language, how we aren't able to be our fullest self. So I know that there's some experiences. My mom actually teaches deaf ed. This is how I kind of got invested into this. There's kids who didn't have language, who didn't know what else to do, how else to communicate. Same way with babies who reach out and like want that communication, would just like bite and latch on because they want some form of human interaction. So if you don't have a first language, you have brain damage. This is just a very like common phrase that's used in this community. And if you don't have a community or a family that supports this, then you're unable to process and develop. So same way with language, it also evolves. So with it, you need the interaction within the community to fully like develop a language, and then in turn it develops on its own. So it's really fascinating to see with my time in Nicaragua how this language started 30 years ago and how it's been developing out of a direct need. So back in Nicaragua, deaf culture is seen as like a kids aren't competent, they are not full functioning members of society. And so taking my experience with that, like seeing how that can also incorporate into our own lives in our own student leader positions. So the same way, the birth of the language, everything has been standardized and it's slowly been evolving into a developmental process, which is like absolutely fascinating to see that a group of students who didn't have a way to communicate came up with their own language. And so learning in different ways is very important because we all learn in different ways, and so this is a very tangible example of like how we all learn in different ways. So I really use the Touch UC and Touch Math blocks to be able to teach this, especially with deaf kids, but not only with hearing kids, because you're able to physically touch and see the different points of connection. So this is just a very tangible example for all of us to be able to see. Same way like the touch blocks. I'm sure we all used those when we were little. That's just another way to see and learn, and then also be able to see those numbers in real time. So this is just a picture of my kiddos and like the sign language in Nicaragua. And then this is the American Sign Language, and it also is very different. And it's very fascinating to see how it's developed over hundreds of years, and it's still used in the same way today. So as student leaders, we can use this information because we are able to implement these different learning styles into our own groups, our own projects, our own communities. So for me as an RA, I get to see how different learning styles can affect different students, and especially as a freshman RA, I get to see that from the very start. So I get to see them come in their first week of classes, they don't really know what they're doing, and they eventually get to figure out, like, oh, it's the flashcards that work for me, it's the studying alone, it's the studying in groups, and like being able to see that development is absolutely fascinating, because same way they do with my kiddos in Nicaragua is like they have their own way of learning and their own way that they process information, and the same way with us, like I don't study with people, I can't study around people, so that's how I learn and that's how I process. There's no one-size-fits-all denominator, which is really important. I think one last thing that I wanted to touch on that I forgot I didn't add a slide for, but was looking at the different ways that also this is a diverse aspect, which can allow you to communicate and get in touch with a lot of different people this way. So being able to implement this into whatever groups, just having an open mindset and being able to process and develop with lots of different people is very, very important, because it not only allows you to open your minds to this subset of people, but also everybody else in turn. Any questions? Yes?
Because I'm curious, is something from your family deaf that's the reason why you started learning sign language at a young age?
No, actually, my mom teaches deaf ed at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. She did her dissertation on the sign language in Nicaragua, which is why I've been there five times now. And so when she was younger, from a small town in Nebraska, saw the little interpreter in the corner of the box, and it's like, I want to be that person. And so growing up, like that was my first language. We still use it around my house, or if we're at church, my mom will like use it to talk to us, just in different situations like that. That's it. All right, thank you all.